All right, Geek in Review, we have finally made it to Sherlock, Season 2, Episode 1, entitled A Scandal in Belgravia. What were your initial thoughts of this episode?
When I watched it for the first time back in the day, absolutely loved it. I thought it was really smart how the first scene is completely tied into the last scene. Because obviously it ended on a kind of cliffhanger, and I don't know if rewatching it today, I felt a little bit like the cliffhanger was an anti-climax, but the first time I watched it, I absolutely loved it.
This episode picks up exactly where the finale left off, and we finally find out who that specific person that Moriarty was talking to, and that specific person really saved John and Sherlock's life in that specific instance. I had forgotten who Moriarty was talking to, and as I was watching this episode, I was like, how can this specific person control Moriarty? Like it was very odd to me that Irene Adler, okay, the cat's out of the bag. This episode is all about
Yeah,
Irene Adler. It was very, very odd to me that Irene Adler could control Moriarty in that way. But as the episode goes on, we find out why Moriarty is allowing himself to be controlled. Did you think something similar to that the first time you watched it?
no, I don't think she was necessarily controlling him. I just think that he is like the ultimate middleman. One thing that I don't think we spoke about in the last review is that the revelation that Moriarty is like the opposite of Sherlock, that he's a consultant criminal. So, he's like a sort of Wall Street trader that he just wants as much as he can get and use that leverage.
After John and Sherlock escape Moriarty's trap, Sherlock gets a visit from several different clients. And the first time that you watch this episode, they seem very, very innocuous. Like, there's one guy complaining that this mortuary sent him the wrong ashes.
Yep.
There's this other girl complaining this mortician wouldn't let her see her grandmother when she died. So as this episode went along, and when we finally discover the big secret or the big turn, I was really, really delighted that I believe Stephen Moffat wrote this episode. I was really delighted that he planted those seeds at the beginning of the episode. He made them come off as being so innocuous, but when you get to the end of this episode, you're like, that's just genius.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the writing was ahead of its time, whereas now we've had bigger and better and more intelligent shows, so you know to look for something like that. But certainly at the time, it was a revelation. The stuff he was doing in Sherlock and the stuff he was doing in Doctor Who.
As we're rewatching Sherlock, I'm starting to like Stephen Moffat a little bit more in Sherlock. I don't know what's happening.
It's individual taste, man. I've always thought that he'd done the best Doctor Who episodes, even like when he done Capaldi's last season. I really didn't like it at the time, but rewatching it back as the whole thing when I binge watch, I loved it. So I think he's a writer that again was maybe not ahead of his time, but he's a writer that was trying to get these intelligent points across in a very intelligent way. And because of people like him, we now have more intelligent TV shows and films. I mean, I'm not saying that he's directly responsible for getting anything else commissioned, but long plots and things like that. At the time of Sherlock, we didn't have it, and now it's all like Marvel Easter eggs and what does this mean? And so again, I wouldn't say it was ahead of its time, but it was trying to push us in the direction that a lot of people wanted to go, or a lot of people were ready for.
The shining jewel of this episode, the actress who plays Irene Adler, her
Mm-hmm.
performance was just so fucking amazing. I love every single second of it, especially the scene where John and Sherlock go to Buckingham Palace. Sherlock
Right. Okay.
basically refuses to put his clothes on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, dude, you are in the most famous building in London and you're not going to put your clothes on for one of your clients? How opinionated you have to be?
True, but I just think again, he just doesn't care. But one note that I have, or a couple of notes that I have from that is there's a weird thing. So Mycroft gives Sherlock a file on Irene Adler, and he says that these are pictures from her website. Why did he get someone to print out the pictures from her website and not just hand over a laptop or a mobile phone and go, "This is her website"? That was really weird.
Since we were about to meet Irene Adler, I
Mm.
gather the photos were more pleasing for the visual meeting than to hand Sherlock just like a small mobile phone from
Mm.
that time.
Watching back with modern, the way things are now, I was like, he's just printed pictures off a website. Who does that?
All throughout Sherlock, Sherlock is like a million miles ahead of everybody
Mm.
that he comes in contact with. And the most wonderful, wonderful little sadistic thing about this episode is that he is not ahead of Irene Adler until the very end of the episode. It is
Yeah.
amazing. For a large portion, Sherlock is astounded by Irene Adler, and the first time that he meets Irene, she makes an impression.
Irene, it's kind of similar to what we're talking about in the last review with Moriarty, where you said he sort of uses his sexuality against Sherlock. Irene's doing exactly the same. She just can. She's so hypersexual and hyperly sexually aware that that's how she controls the situation, and she knows how to read guys because she knows that she might not physically be your type, but she certainly knows how to get what she wants from guys. So when he first meets her, he puts on this little act of pretending to be like a vicar that's been assaulted to get into her house or her apartment or whatever you want to call it. And he sort of gets in and he's not wandering about. He goes to the living room. She walks in completely naked, which even if you're Sherlock Holmes or you're anyone else, if you see a human being or a human being that you're not expecting to see naked, it does throw you straight off of whatever you're thinking of doing. So
Mhm.
it makes an impact.
The ultimate resolution is that Irene Adler has this phone with pictures of all her sadistic secret clients, right? And all these people that she has on her phone are high people in the British government. She basically holds the phone over Mycroft's head as insurance to protect her from Moriarty.
When Mycroft introduces the problem to Sherlock, he basically says, "We know that she's got this, but the problem is she's not asked for anything, so we want it back to stop her from doing it in the future." And then
Mm-hmm.
once Sherlock's met her and they've had that whole exchange, Sherlock just says, "Well, she's just going to keep it for insurance," but he doesn't say what. So I think it is for Moriarty, but I think it's also probably for other things that just aren't mentioned.
We've remarked on our reviews of Sherlock before that we would like Sherlock to be a little longer and possibly we would like Sherlock to be more episodes, or at least I've hinted at that. And I was thinking if we had Sherlock be more episodes, it wouldn't be this complicated.
The dialogue is very quick as well. There's not really a wasted word, even when they're doing comedy. It's only for a split second. I noticed that. I don't think I noticed it as much in the first three episodes, but this one I noticed there's a lot of dialogue. Like that whole scene in Irene Adler's living room when she's naked. Between the three characters, there's a lot of dialogue going on, and then they're in that room for about 5 or 6 minutes, and because they don't actually talk about the phone or what Sherlock's there for like 90% of that conversation.
The other thing that I found very, very interesting is that in this episode, we really get a picture of Mycroft as a brother. You know, despite the fact that Irene Adler uses Sherlock to help Moriarty in some way, Mycroft really cares about Sherlock. When he thinks Irene is dead,
Mm-hmm.
he actually fabricates this lie with John Watson to protect Sherlock's emotions. I was really surprised by that because in the first two episodes, we see Mycroft as a caring brother, but I didn't believe that he would put Sherlock ahead of his loyalty to the British crown.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't think Mycroft was developed that well in Sherlock. They could have done a lot more with him. He kind of, maybe after this episode, sort of became the guy that shows up and they have a little bit of banter with, John and Sherlock gang up on him, or Sherlock and Mycroft gang up on John. I wish they had done more with him, but I think the reason that he's so sort of tough love is I don't think they say it directly. They sort of hint at it, but that Sherlock was a heroin addict, so he's probably very wary of being nice in case he relapses. And Sherlock, tries to take advantage of him, and it's just, I'm just going to stay for one night. I'm just going to need £500, that kind of thing.
Are we going to get into Sherlock's deal with addiction? Are we going to get a little something with that as we move further on
Uh,
here?
I think they mention it a couple of times, but they don't specifically use the words like heroin or anything like that. They just say that he had an addiction and they look for needles. So it's not hard to put. You don't need to be Sherlock to put it together.
In this episode, it goes from, I believe, fall to Christmas, right? Or something like that.
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
And in the Christmas section of this episode, a bunch of our main characters get together, and Molly comes to Sherlock's flat to celebrate Christmas Eve with them. And
Mhm.
the way that Sherlock berates Molly really pissed me off. It made me want to punch him in the face. And I never want to punch Sherlock in the face because I love Sherlock. But the way that he constantly says the meanest thing possible to this young woman who is the nicest person possible really pisses me off. How did you feel about that?
I think if it was written today, that would be totally different. He would not act that way towards the character. You wouldn't get away with that on TV now, certainly not the BBC. But yeah, and I don't know. Again, Molly felt like one of these things of they didn't really do much. They could have done more with her, not give her an entire episode or anything like that, but certainly added more to her story and character because, again, like Mycroft, she just sort of showed up and was there for that one thing and then was gone. We didn't really learn anything much more of her. But yeah, the way he treated her was absolutely shit.
The way that the show was structured is that every season we get 3 episodes, and those 3 episodes are basically like a TV movie. If I had that much time, I would give as much time as I could to each of my principal characters. I wouldn't give the mind share of the story to Sherlock and John, and I feel that Mark and Stephen Moffat are kind of doing that. I don't understand why they introduce these minor characters if they're not going to give them meaty stuff to do.
Lestrad's another one where they could have done so much with his relationship with Sherlock and that dynamic. And he's not even in every episode. I think some episodes they just go, oh, he's away on a training course or
Right.
Sherlock somewhere else. But yeah, when I watched the first season, and especially the first episode, I was very disappointed in the Lestrade Sherlock thing. But going back and watching it, you're absolutely right that these people are just sort of there to move the dialogue forward, not necessarily the story.
The character that gets the most development besides John and Sherlock, Mrs. Hudson, because Mrs. Hudson gets a very interesting scene where she gets kidnapped by the American CIA, and Sherlock has to basically save her life, and the way that he goes about that is very interesting.
Yeah, there's no, not a lot of action, but there's a bit more action and outdoorsy stuff than a lot of the earlier episodes we've seen. But I haven't talked about the scene in the country with the boomerang, which I thought, again, watching it back was odd. It's just two random strangers in a field in the country. When you watch it back, you're like, that's very weird that these two guys are just standing there together.
I'm finding it very difficult to remember every little thing that happens in these episodes because it's so goddamn long. Why didn't they just break this up into 1 hour episodes?
I would rather that they done like the one story over the three, one, whatever it is, 1 hour, 20 minutes, or 1.5 hour episodes, because you could tell, you could develop all the side characters more under one story rather than having 3 stories. That's what I would have liked to see.
The final thing that I really liked about this episode is that we see that Sherlock has human emotions in this episode. In the previous episodes, Sherlock has come off as very cold, very mean, and very calculated. But the introduction of Irene Adler really makes us understand that Sherlock is capable of loving and he is capable of actually caring about people. In the scenes with the actress who plays Irene Adler, I thought was genius. I thought it was wonderful how he actually was able to emote that Sherlock actually cares about people and actually does care about what they think of him.
I think from a story point of view, they had to make him a bit human. You couldn't just have him always be the sort of a very intelligent, very angry guy. I like that they did make him human And I think that he is. I think the reason that he sort of not fell for Irene, because they don't really fall for each other in the traditional love story sense, but the reason that there was an attraction between them is, and I think it was our last review we spoke about it, is Sherlock doesn't understand why more people don't think the way he thinks or like view the world the way that he does it. And she completely does it. She just does it in her own, sings to a different song or sings to a different tune, but she can pretty much do what he can do. So I think that's why the attraction's there. It's got nothing to do with the fact that she's a good looking woman that showed up naked. It's the fact that she's his intellectual match. The bit where Irene Adler drugs Sherlock and he's having the hallucinations, the direction and the cinematography in this episode are notably better than the first three, because he's sort of explaining, oh, it's not a crime, it's an accident. He's explaining how this accident happened, and then she's sort of, the furniture from the real world is in the field, so she's sitting in the chair that was in her living room with the television there, and he's sitting in another chair, and then she just says, right, okay, go to sleep, and you think he's going to fall into the bed, but it's the bed that's coming up towards him. And I know there's some special effects way of doing it, but I love when they mix that sort of dream reality or dreams going from reality, or people sort of how they cut scenes with people hitting a hammer and then someone's smashed a tomato in the next scene, that kind of thing.
When Sherlock finally deciphers the code that Irene got hired to decipher for Moriarty, and she says, I would have you right here on this table twice. But I just love the chemistry between Sherlock and Irene Adler throughout the runtime of this episode, because I think it's so goddamn great.
Dylan is supposed to be, very condescending towards other people. He's not with her because he knows as soon as he meets her that I don't know how, I've never run into this problem and I do not know how to handle it, because obviously it jumps between him looking at Watson and working out what Watson's going to do for the rest of the night, and him looking at her and not being able to detect anything at all.
Do you have any final thoughts about this episode?
Yeah, it's probably my favourite of the four so far. The pace wasn't as good as I remember watching it back. I did think the dialogue was a little bit too quick and there was too much crammed in. But one thing I meant to say is going back to the scene in the palace, when there's a sort of back and forth between Mycroft and Sherlock. I said this before we were recording. I don't know if this was in my head or it is something that other people can see, but the way that Benedict Cumberbatch plays Sherlock there reminded me exactly of how he plays Stephen Strange. Like, he knows everything. He finishes people's sentences for them. He gives them information. And it was just that one little scene, nothing else in this, but that one scene, I was like, that's Stephen Strange.
For me, there's a very, very strong divide between Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Stephen Strange. I'll do it. If the good folks at home want to talk to you, Geek, about pop culture or anything, what's the best place that they could reach you?
On Twitter at The Geeks Reviews, or on YouTube, if you just search The Geek In Review, you'll find me.
All right, guys. And if you guys want to talk to me about anything, I'm also on Twitter. I'm at CreekFanatic88. Till next time, as always, I'll see you when I see you.
So much happened here, and so much is about to.